recording. So I'm going to record the first part of this, and I'm going to show you my screen, and we're going to look at some images of the core. I'm also going to record a portion of this class, and with these recordings, especially as I'm like learning, I kind of do a few and then pick the best one, right? So just know that. And also, you know, the core, it's such like an interesting concept because part of what we're looking for there is a deep inner stability. A deep inner stability. So that when we have that deep inner stability in our body, the limbs and other parts of the body can do all kinds of wild, wonderful things like back bend and eagle arms and forward bend and arm balance and handstand and all of that. But if we don't have that strong, stable core, when we try to do wild things, it kind of falls apart. And I talk about that first because think of also how that really applies to the situation and circumstances we have right now. Things are wild, things are chaotic. We kind of have these unprecedented circumstances with this pandemic, plus all of these social justice and systemic problems in our culture coming up at the same time. So then the ability to have a strong mental, emotional core allows us to navigate the wild times more smoothly, gracefully, with integrity, just like the strong core of our body allows us to navigate the poses and the transitions and the wild things more smoothly, gracefully, efficiently. So this is a good example of how yes, the practice is physical. Yes, we're doing things with our body on the mat, and the teachings that are translated with and without our knowledge to the mind and the emotions is really significant and powerful too. And when you're aware of how they translate, then I think they become easier to access off the mat. So as we dive into the deep core awareness with the images, also keep in mind that we're working to establish a deep core of mental emotional stability too. So the deep core, you know, every once in a while I mention it and someone asks the brilliant question of, what is the deep core? What do you mean by that? And I love that question because, you know, some of these words and concepts have become kind of second nature to me. I often tell like clients, you know, I speak yoga ease 24/7. So if you need me to translate, please ask. And the deep core is one of those kind of yoga concepts that I use a lot. And, you know, a lot of this has actually come from physical therapists and even the structural integration work and anatomy trains of Tom Myers. So when I say the deep core muscles, I'm referring to 4 muscles. Number one is actually a group called the pelvic floor muscles. And you'll see here they're at the base of your torso. If you think of the abdominals like a basket weave, the pelvic floor muscles are the bottom of the basket. Then there are the multifidi. These muscles run up your spine like shoelaces, and they're stabilizers as well as spacers for in between the vertebra. The best news about the multifidi is that they become engaged anytime you lift the pelvic floor. The multifidi are too deep to feel, so you're not going to feel them like you would your quads or your biceps. They also play a huge role in proprioception, so in your balance. Now, the next muscle in the deep core group is the transverse abdominis. These, if the pelvic floor is the bottom of the basket weave of your torso, then the transverse abdominis would be like the sides. And those muscles run kind of like around you, just like the basket would have like a kind of a rounding to its weave. And most of us are very attuned nowadays to the low belly. But just as important are these upper fibers of transverse abdominis, and that will have a strong relationship to the diaphragm. Not everyone is going to include the respiratory diaphragm in the deep core, but I do, because it plays such a huge role in kind of what we'll get out of transverse abdominis and the pelvic floor muscles, but also because as yogis, we put great emphasis on breathing, and the diaphragm is the muscle of respiration. The respiratory diaphragm and the pelvic floor diaphragm actually work in tandem, and we want them to become like a jellyfish, that they breathe together. So as the respiratory diaphragm fills up and pulls air into the lungs, then the pelvic floor muscles expand and open too. And then when the respiratory diaphragm rolls up and pushes the air out of the lungs, the pelvic floor diaphragm lifts too. So then you get this pulse with the breath and the deep core. Now, there's a common misperception that you need to like get the pelvic floor muscles going and keep them on all the time. A tight muscle is a weak muscle. Just like if you clench your fist and were to keep it clenched for a long period of time, it would kind of freeze and harden that way and actually kind of atrophy. A strong muscle is one that can both expand and contract. Just like everything else, health is flow. Part of that kind of misperception about kind of grabbing and holding on, I think also has to do with the translation of the bandha as lock or seal versus link, right? And lock or seal, hold on, you know, kind of shut and closed and energy only going one way, versus link is about communication, connection, and relationship. Now, one of the, I really didn't even see a picture of the respiratory diaphragm for years. And it is an interesting structure. It's a double domed structure. It kind of fills up almost like a balloon when you inhale, and then kind of rolls up and out on the exhale. And when you breathe in, and it moves down, it actually massages many of the organs of digestion. You'll see like kind of the intestines down here. When you exhale, it moves up to push air out of the lungs, but also notice, here's the heart. It almost kind of massages and nudges the heart on the exhale. And again, it's a diaphragm, so it has a trampoline-like spring structure. And the same is true of the pelvic floor diaphragm. You'll notice that it's got lots of different muscles going lots of different ways. And one of the reasons we need this trampoline-like spring quality to the pelvic floor diaphragm is because it needs to keep things in, like your organs, but also let things out, like waste elimination. And for women, it needs to be able to deliver a baby. Now, all of these muscles kind of have their kind of wild names. Collectively, we call them the pelvic floor muscles. And then there's also the levator ani group. And I'm going to point out some bony landmarks here that we talk about all the time in yoga. So these are the sitting bones, ischial tuberosities. And you'll notice that, like, again, they have a lot of connection to the pelvic floor muscles. Top of the femur bone, neck of the femur bone. This is the hip joint. Okay. And then you have the tailbone, and that's just this little guy right here. One of the reasons the tailbone became such a predominant cue in yoga land is because the pelvic floor muscles attach there. These are big, strong ligaments that attach the sacrum to the pelvis. And then your sacrum, the root and rudder of your spine, would be in here. So you'll see that the pelvic floor quite complex. And last but certainly not least, the transverse abdominis. So you'll notice that the muscle fibers kind of go around. Also, the notice that it kind of wraps around your whole abdomen. And one of the cues I think is really useful for engaging this muscle is this idea of an X. And if you draw an X between rib points and hip points, when you contract the transverse abdominis, it's like you want to make that X smaller. And that's where you also get cues about the navel, or like I'll sometimes say like a sinkhole in your belly, because when that X contracts, you want to feel it drawing down towards the floor and the spine. Now, the upper abdominals fibers are often what's tricky for people to engage, this area right in here. Notice that transverse abdominis goes all the way up to your breastbone, your sternum, and the xiphoid process. And often you'll want to pull the ribs in and then draw them down when engaging these muscles. And we're going to talk about kind of what's this white stuff in here in just a moment. So the transverse abdominis, one of the reasons it's super tricky to be able to feel is because they're deep. And that's also, you know, part of the name, the deep core. And I think sometimes people get frustrated or feel like they're not getting it just because they don't feel these muscles in the same way they feel more superficial muscles like the quads or rectus abdominis or the biceps. But deeper muscles mean that they're more subtle. And you'll see here when you see all the abdominals together that, you know, the most superficial here on the sides, the obliques. And then you'll see the ones going down. This is the rectus abdominis, the commonly known as six-pack muscles. And then notice that they had to cut away 2 layers in order to show you the transverse abdominis. Now, the last thing I'm going to point out is that there's this white structure here, and they use white in these anatomical drawings to indicate connective tissue. So these are areas of connective tissue, not like meaty muscle. This is another reason that often students find these muscles elusive, because they're looking for the meaty muscle sensation, the sensation like the quads, and you're not going to get that there because we're in the realm of connective tissue. So the sense of linkage or space or suction or light drawing up and back, these more subtle sensations are actually what you're after, because we're working with connective tissue rather than the muscles. So that is a not so short introduction to your deep core. But I hope, you know, again, one of the things that I want us to do is start to redefine how we think about some of these concepts in yoga, and also being able to understand, like, why would it be more elusive to work into this area and not see that as a setback or a problem, or it means that you're not getting it, but that you're actually looking for something very different, much softer, sweeter, and spacious in these areas than that hard, fast contraction of a muscle. So as we dive in, also remember too that we're working to create this strong core inside, physically, but also mentally and emotionally. And I know this is a difficult time for everyone, so often the mind wanders. Just bring it back with the gentleness that you would place a baby bird in its mother's nest. Okay, we're going to begin laying down. And once you're laying down, cross your right ankle over your left thigh. Draw your knees into your chest, needle's eye. And here, just breathe fully, deeply, and notice how there's a natural expansion with the diaphragm, the belly. You might even be able to feel it all the way down into the pelvic floor. And that expansion occurs on your inhale as the diaphragm fills up. And then with every exhale, there's a natural contraction, condensing, a drawing up and in of low belly and pelvic floor. And sometimes I think that to feel those subtle sensations of the breath just requires more presence and patience. Stick with it. Stay focused. 3 more breaths. Take another inhale. And then exhale, change sides. Left ankle over the right thigh. Begin by breathing fully, deeply, and noticing the natural expansion on the inhale and the natural contraction on the exhale. And part of noticing what happens to the breath naturally is so that this isn't something foreign to the body. And then the alignment and action that we are going to return to over and over and over again during practice is enhancing the natural phenomena. It's drawing more awareness and also more potential and power from it. Last inhale and exhale, put both feet on the floor. Next is the core press exercise. Place your hands on your thighs, lift your knees up, shins up, press hands into legs and legs into hands. And then when the pelvic floor draws in, it feels a little bit like the sitting bones drawing in because they attach there. And then you want a sense of the pelvic floor muscles pulling straight up, like up towards your head. And then the low belly pulls down, front ribs draw in and down. So again, imagine that X across your midsection, and with every exhale, that X is getting smaller. A few more breaths here. If you can't feel it, imagine it and keep looking for it. One more inhale. And then exhale, put both feet on the floor. Okay, we're going to do that again. Hands on your thighs, lift knees up, shins up, press hands into legs, legs into hands. Pelvic floor up. A byproduct of pelvic floor up is low belly down. Those are the lower fibers of transverse abdominis. And then you've really got to work for the ribs in and down, which upper fibers of transverse abdominis. And it'll feel like the ribs are being knit in, like you're closing that gap in the upper ribs and then drawing them down to the floor. One more inhale. Exhale, put both feet on the floor. So these muscles, the deep core, are endurance muscles, which mean we want like a light hum all the time. So we're going to do one more round, and you're soften incrementally, like 10%, 10%, 4%, until it feels like something that you could maintain for a long period of time. Hands on your thighs, lift knees up, shins up, press hands into legs, legs into hands. Pelvic floor up, low belly down, ribs in and down. First, kind of give it all you've got to get these muscles turned on, and then soften slowly and incrementally until this is something that you can maintain, until it feels like a light, comforting hum of inner strength. Last breath. And place your feet on the floor. Now, heel of your hand on your hip points and fingers point towards your pubic bone. So we're going to do these pelvic tilts. It's kind of like a laying down cat and cow. Roll your pelvis forward. So there's a little bit of a mouse house in between your low back and the floor. Stay here for a few breaths and breathe all the way down to the pubic bone, all the way down into the low belly. And you might even be able to feel the pelvic floor expand and open at that crest of the inhale. Now, for some of us, because we've been trained to suck in the belly, this will be an area that feels very vulnerable and maybe uncomfortable. Stick with it. Do the best that you can. Go slowly. Take another big inhale all the way down to pelvic floor, low belly. And then exhale, pull the belly down, pull the ribs in and down, engage the deep core and flatten your low back to the floor. And now we're going to move with the breath. Inhale, roll into the back bend shape. Breathe all the way down into the low belly. And then exhale, use your abdominals to contract and flatten. Evan, very good. I like the hands on the ribs for you. Keep going. Inhale. Exhale. Keep moving with your own breath. Once you've got the hang of it, the hands can go out to a cactus, a T, or a low V. And keep moving in that rhythm, allowing the root and rudder of the spine, the sacrum, to guide the movements of the spine. And as you continue to learn and grow here, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what to look for and how this will relate to poses that are coming. One of the major misalignments I've seen lately is that people tend to really crank in the back bends to really try to work and get somewhere. And then they try to hang in the forward bends. It becomes more passive. And I would encourage you to do the opposite. And this tells us a lot, right? Here, when you roll into the back bend shape and you get the space between your low back and the floor, it's like you're allowing the back bend to happen. Then when you flatten your lower back to the floor, you really got to get the abdominals going. And the same thing is true when we're not laying down on the floor. 3 more. Stay focused, stay dedicated. Notice the allowing, the softening, the opening in the back bend, and then the condensing, the contracting, the working of the forward bend. After your last one, make your way onto hands and knees, and we're going to apply these principles to cat and cow. Amanda, I spotlighted your video. Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you. Good. So in cow pose, allow the spine to arc into the back bend, and it's initiated from the sacrum. And then exhale when you round into cat, really pull the pelvic floor, pull the low belly up, pull the ribs up and in. Keep going. V, squeeze the shoulders more during cow. Ah, beautiful. Excellent. Very good. Excellent, Anastasia. Okay, last one. Evan, getting so much better. Good work. And then with your next cat pose, go to child's pose. Keep your arms out in front of you as far as they will go. And walk your hands over to the right. Press your palms down forward and really root your hips to your heels. Inhale back to center and walk your hands over to the left. Inhale back to center. Now pull yourself up onto hands and knees. Thread your right arm underneath your left for a twist. Some of you may extend your left leg out towards your right hand. Good, Peter. And Peter, put the right shoulder and the right side of the head down on the floor. Excellent. Now inhale, unravel. And exhale, second side. Thread your left arm under the right. And maybe extend the right leg. Inhale, unravel. And exhale, downward facing dog. So we're going to do a little bit of what we did last week, and you'll be able to take the intelligence of the deep core to enhance and expand the forward bends, and then you'll use that inner stability to create more length and space during your back bends. Walk your hands back towards your feet, Uttanasana. Now, normally I would tell you to hang here, but really like the hang comes after you've done all the deep core work. For example, pressing down through the four corners of your feet in a way that encourages your arches to lift. And then from the arches of the feet, it's like there's a trickle of power that runs up the inseam of your legs that gathers the pelvic floor, low belly. You've got to tuck in the ribs, that's a little bit of extra. Then the upper body can hang. Then the head hangs. And then the hanging creates a releasing in the spine. When you've got the deep core power churning upward from the feet and legs, it's like it lifts from the low belly, spills up over the pelvis, and then trickles down from sitting bones to heels. Keep that current of grounding in your legs and walk your hands forward slowly and deliberately to downward facing dog. Inhale, come forward to plank. From the low belly, keep reaching through the back side of the legs, grounding through the heels. V, lift the hips a little higher. Heather, front ribs a little up towards the ceiling. Better. Exhale, lower all the way down onto your stomach. Now, place your hands by your hips for locust. Lift shoulders up, chest up, legs up, arms up. Here you just kind of want to get a baseline. And then we're going to build the power and potential in the body. Place your palms down on the floor at about the hip height. Hip height still? Good. Elbows bend. Place the palms down by the hips. Bend the elbows a little bit and lift your shoulders up more. Then press the tops of your feet down in a way that tones the hamstrings and glutes and allows you to lift the low belly. Now, you're not going to want to stay here because it's intense. It's uncomfortable. There's a lot of heat, a lot of tapas, a lot of rub. Just stick with it for another breath. And then spring upward with legs and hands again. It's like you're harvesting, taking advantage of all that strength and integrity you've built. Feet up, hands up, chest up. One more inhale. Beautiful. Exhale, lower down. Inhale, hands and knees. Exhale, child's pose, hips to heels. Inhale, hands and knees again. Exhale, downward facing dog. Step your right foot forward inside edge of your hand and begin the rocking lunge. Bend the back knee, pelvis forward, chest up. This is your inhale. Exhale, straighten both legs, lift belly up, lift ribs up. Good, keep going. A few more with your own breath. Notice in particular with the exhale and when you straighten the legs, if you can get that sense of a corset being tightened. Good, Evan. The X across your midsection growing smaller and pulling towards the spine or towards the ceiling. I often tell this funny story that, I had a dog, another dog, a different dog, Leela, and I was dating this guy who was a kayaker and he wanted to go kayaking. I was like, well, I have the dog, I can't go. So he actually got the dog a life vest, which was awesome. And we did take her kayaking. But we could pick her up by this life vest, like a harness, very handy, right? But you want to imagine there's that same type of harness lifting your midsection every time you go into this type of forward bend. Now, next time you straighten the legs, stay there. And then hop your left foot forward a little bit. Spin the left heel down. Inhale, pull your chest forward. And as you pull the chest forward, pull the right hip back. Always the push-pull in yoga. Good, Valerie. Exhale, fold in and drop your head. Again, inhale, lift and lengthen. Create space and possibility. Exhale, fold in deeply. One more. Inhale as you lift and lengthen, really ground through both feet, all four corners, and then exhale, fold in, and we're going to hold for 5 breaths. Some of you may feel more stable sliding the hands back a lot. If you feel super solid and grounded through your legs, you can interlace your hands behind your back, which is kind of the culmination of our practice last week. Let the head hang from the support of the core and the legs. Last inhale. Exhale, hands to the floor. Inhale, bend your front knee, chest forward. Exhale, downward facing dog. Modified vinyasa, inhale onto hands and knees for cow pose. Exhale, hips to heels, child's pose. Inhale all the way to easy up dog. Flip your toes, use your core, and exhale back to down dog. Step your left foot forward for the second side. Begin the rocking lunge Like cat and cow, move with your own breath pattern. And especially if you ever feel a little lost or confused, remember that the breath is the great teacher. There's the natural filling and swelling and opening of the inhale, and that carries you into the low lunge and the back bend. And then there's the natural condensing, contracting, and grounding that carries you into the straight leg lunge and the forward bend. Once you feel complete, content, harmonized between the sides, stay in the straight leg lunge. Hop the right foot forward, spin the heel down, and then inhale, lift and lengthen the spine, pull the heart forward like you're trying to draw the sternum in between your arms. And then exhale, fold in and allow the head to drop a bit. Again, inhale, lift and lengthen. Imagine someone's hand wrapping the left hip back and around. And then keep that as you exhale, fold in. One more pulse. Inhale, create some space. Exhale, move into that space. Stay in the forward bend. You can place the hands kind of farther back, more underneath shoulders, or interlace the hands behind your back. Evan, soften the front knee a little bit and then wrap the hip more. Yes, yes. Take another inhale. Exhale, hands to the floor. Inhale, chest forward. Exhale, downward facing dog. Inhale to cow pose. Exhale, child's pose. Inhale, easy up dog. And exhale, back to down dog.